When I was a wee lad growing up, I didn't really used to play a lot of strategy games. I was always more interested in shooters, games like Half-Life, Doom, Unreal Tournament, that sort of stuff. And around the time of my birth and very early childhood, RTS games were at their peak with many genre-defining titles. None of these won me over, however. I was still pretty much more interested in shooting demons, aliens, and evil military men. Still, there was one game that hooked me up pretty intensely all those years ago. Enter Stronghold, a real-time strategy game and castle simulator. It was developed by Firefly Studios and released all the way back in 2001. And in today's video I will be covering both this game and its sequel, Stronghold Crusader, released a mere year later. So let's begin. Let's start with the original first. As a game, Stronghold can primarily be divided into two major segments. One is combat oriented, while the other is all about managing your castle's economy. Both of these segments feature several different sub-modes. The main mode, however, is the military campaign. There is also an economic campaign, but that one is really short and it doesn't have any sort of story. It's just a collection of 5 loosely connected missions. So let's turn over our attention to the military campaign. The story in this one goes like this. England has been taken over by 4 ruthless tyrants, namely the rat, the snake, the pig, and the wolf, each more vile and sinister than the last. You play as the son of one of the king's advisors. Your father was killed by one of the 4 tyrants, and your only 2 remaining allies are Lord Wolsack and Sir Longarm. They effectively serve as your superiors, as they'll brief you about your objectives before each mission. Lord Wolsack is calm and cautious, while Longarm is all about the action.
I say we act now, and strike while the iron is hot!
No. The few men we have would be cut down like lambs to the slaughter. We need time to gather our forces.
The story and the characters are actually really simple and one-dimensional. I mean, the 4 tyrants are comically evil with very exaggerated personalities. There is a total of 15 missions in the campaign, and one can say that it basically serves as an extended tutorial, as these 15 missions will pretty much cover basically every mechanic Stronghold has. There is a dedicated tutorial mission, but that one is pretty bare-boned and it only teaches you the absolute basics of the gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, let's talk about it, shall we? As mentioned before, Stronghold is both a real-time strategy and castle simulator. What this means is that you'll be spending a lot of time managing your castle's economy and balancing resources. You also always need to keep an eye out on your lord, as losing him is an instant game over. When you start a mission, you'll be asked to place your castle's keep and granary before being allowed to proceed. Though this can vary from mission to mission, as some will start you with an already established base. Moving on, your first priority when building your castle will be to secure 2 of the most vital resources, food and wood. These 2 present the absolute basics of your economy, as food keeps your peasants happy and wood is needed for like 80% of all the structures in the game. Speaking of these structures, they are all nicely divided into sections and subsections based on what purpose they serve. So you have your castle buildings like walls and gates and barracks, industry buildings, farms, town buildings, weaponsmiths, and food processing buildings. As mentioned before, you'll need wood for the vast majority of these buildings. Other resources include stone, iron, and pitch. Each of these resources is gathered through appropriate buildings, which can only be placed on designated resource landmarks. The same applies for farms. Aside from the dairy farms, which can be placed on a more elevated position, all other farms require a green valley floor surface. This is why, aside from mission objectives, the overall difficulty of the game will rely heavily on the layout of the map and the location of your keep. It is very important to know that all resource materials have to be delivered to your stockpile, which is tied directly to your keep. Likewise, food is delivered to your granary, so you will need to carefully plan the layout of your castle. Okay, now that you've established your basic economy, it's time to take a look at some of the more advanced features. In the lower right corner of your screen, you'll notice some numbers. These indicate your popularity among your peasants. Naturally, the higher it is, the better it is for you. The easiest way of keeping your workers happy is to feed them well and to have low taxes. However, these are often not enough, as it takes time and investment to constantly have several food resources up and running. And you're gonna need to raise money somehow, as trading is often not enough. Since Stronghold also features random events that will negatively affect you, like diseases, fires, and other misfortunes.
Bandits are operating near the castle, Lordship. Your popularity is falling.
It can be quite difficult maintaining a good image through food and taxes alone. That's why you can turn over to several other sources of happiness. Religion, entertainment, booze, all of these can provide a huge boost in your popularity. Instead of wasting that precious farmland space for another apple farm, you can build a hops farm, a brewery, and an inn, and watch your peasants get absolutely shit-faced. Or better yet, use that free land to build a magnificent cathedral and spread the word of the Lord, ideally among the drunks.
This building has no labor, sire.
If all of that's not enough, you can decorate your castle with various gardens, monuments, and maypoles. While these will boost your happiness and your troops' morale, there is a big downside to this. Your peasants will be less productive and will spend a portion of their time wandering around the gardens. On the other hand, you can play as a cruel lord and place gallows, stocks, and other torture devices. When I was a kid, I always thought that your peasants would actually get killed if I placed a gallows, so I avoided all execution buildings. However, in reality, these buildings boost the productivity of your workers, but they give off a negative bonus to your popularity and will demoralize your troops. This fear factor and other statistics are always visible and easily trackable in the menu on where the popularity meter is located. Here you can also see the amount of gold, as well as your castle's population. Final word on the popularity meter, as I'm sure I wasted more time than necessary. In essence, it's only important to keep the number above 50, as anything below will cause your peasants to leave the castle, at which point you can just say GG and restart the game. Moving on, let's talk about the military side of things. Even in this gameplay aspect, Stronghold shines with its ideas. While recruiting troops is instant, unlike in many other RTSs, in order to actually produce a single soldier, you're gonna have to accomplish several prior steps. For every unit type, you're going to need a weapon, armor, except for archers and spearmen, gold, and a free peasant. Weapon production again falls under castle management, and you will need adequate resources, gold, and time for the weaponsmith to physically make the weapon, and finally an armory to store it. This is where good planning once again comes into play, as you'll want your Fletchers and Armorers to have a quick and easy access to both the stockpile and the armory. Alternatively, you can buy weapons from the market if you have the gold. Once you have all the necessary arms, you can start recruiting troops. There are several different unit types, but as you play the game, you'll notice that all of them remain useful throughout the course of the campaign. Spearmen may be pretty weak, but they are also fast, cheap as hell, and very easy to mass produce. In vast quantities, they can serve as excellent cannon fodder for your heavier troops, or simply overwhelm the enemy. Other melee troops include Macemen. They are the fastest melee units in the game, perfect for rushing enemy bases. Their leather armor, however, makes them relatively vulnerable. Next are the Pikemen, the ultimate defense units. Their heavy metal armor makes them incredibly durable, and their pikes are perfect for holding choke points. Swordsmen are your walking tanks. They are the slowest units in the game, but also the most powerful. There are also knights who ride on horses, but I never liked using these guys much myself. They are more of a harasser type of unit. There are also two ranged units, archers and crossbowmen. Crossbowmen are basically your medieval snipers, able to no-scope pretty much any unarmored or lightly armored unit clean off the map. Archers, on the other hand, don't have the armor nor the armor penetration of the crossbowmen, but they are way faster, cheaper, have longer range, and have access to fire. Speaking of fire, fire is Stronghold's equivalent of a thermonuclear weapon of mass destruction. It can destroy any building and turn any unit into charcoal in seconds. Fire is the best way to defend your castle from incoming attacks. You can basically surround your walls with some pitch ditch, place an archer next to a brazier, or boil some oil and give it to your trusty engineers and watch as the armada of enemy swordsmen literally melt before your very eyes. Unfortunately, as the old saying goes, fire is a good servant but a bad master. Should your buildings get lit, say goodbye to your economy. Sure, you can build wells, but a single water boy can do little against the flames signifying the end times. Subsequently, in siege missions, you also need to be wary, as your foes can use the same tactics. Pitch ditches are invisible in the eyes of the enemy, so your best bet would be to try and bait the AI into wasting their precious dragon breath on your more weaker units. Speaking of AI, Stronghold suffers in this department in several ways. For starters, unit pathfinding can be broken at times, and your troops will not always take the most sensible route when instructed to move. However, the same applies to the enemy, as they'll tend to send their troops in waves rather than all at once. And sometimes they too will spaz out and take a more interesting route. You also can't set a rally point for your units, nor can you set some sort of formation. You only have a choice between three stances. A little bit bare-boned, especially when compared to other RTSs at the time, but it really isn't a huge game breaker. Apart from combat units, you also have access to support ones, like engineers, laddermen, and tunnelers. Tunnelers can dig and destroy walls and lesser towers, while laddermen allow you to climb walls. However, in my honest opinion, engineers are the most important ones. They can build and command various siege weapons, as well as drop fiery death upon thine foes. Apart from fire, you can also defend your castle with moats, as well as mounting ballistas and mangonels on your towers. And if crossbowmen are the snipers of Stronghold, then ballistas are a fucking anti-material rifle. Seriously, these things have a humongous range and can one-shot an unarmored unit. Thankfully, you can build your medieval howitzers in the forms of trebuchets and other catapults. All in all, once you get a hang of all the different units and embrace their strengths and weaknesses, assembling an attack force or mounting a perfect defense becomes really, really fun. Finally, I need to talk about the game modes. As stated before, Stronghold has 2 campaigns, but apart from that, you also have individual missions as well as free build. Individual missions can be either economic or military in nature, and usually revolve around collecting different resources or surviving enemy onslaughts, usually with some twists into form of a random event occurring frequently, or locking off certain buildings and limiting trade. On the other hand, free build allows you to design a castle of your dreams, and by clicking F1 you can call upon certain positive and negative events yourself.
Bandits are operating near the castle, Lordship.
Stronghold also comes with a powerful map editor where you can really let your creativity shine. I remember making very basic maps as a kid and making up my own story as I'd play through them hours on end. Unfortunately, Stronghold lacks a classic skirmish mod against the AI. On the other hand, you can download hundreds upon hundreds of maps off the internet, as the community for this game is still going strong. These custom maps are very fun and range from classic missions to typical eye candy and renditions of famous fantasy castles and battles. Finally, let's talk about the game's presentation. For its time, the game looks really good. The sprite work is beautiful and still holds up, and many of the buildings have these 3D animations in the right corner, all accompanied by an adequate sound effects. You can also see the inside of the building whenever a peasant is actually working, signifying their progress. The maps are also pretty colorful, and the combination of different atmospheric sound effects really amplify this game's already amazing atmosphere. The music is also fucking awesome. Seriously, Stronghold's soundtrack is amongst my absolute favorites when it comes to video game music. And it also changes dynamically based on what's happening on the screen. The voice acting is also pretty next level. All of the voices from the narrator and your advisor, to the various battle cries of your enemies and soldiers, will stay carved in your mind for the rest of eternity. It's clear as day that the overall tone of the game was meant to appeal to a more younger audience, and in that area, Stronghold gets a 10 from me. A few years back an HD version was released. This version doesn't really change anything much, apart from adding native support for a 920 by 1080 resolution. I actually like these minimalist changes, as they don't mess with the core experience. Though, in my opinion, I don't really like playing Stronghold on this resolution, because certain maps are way too small, and when you zoom out you get, well, this. So I prefer to play on a lower resolution. I've also noticed that the terrain can sometimes fool you. What I mean by this is that even though you have the option of flattening the terrain and rotate the map, though you can't do a full 3D rotation because the game itself is not in 3D, you sometimes can't properly see those small gaps where units can squeeze through. Also, sometimes a character sprite can interfere with the building sprite, making it seem like they're going through the building. I've been playing this game for a very long time and I swear I can't remember this happening on older systems. Or maybe it's just my memory failing me. Either way, it doesn't really matter because these are all small annoyances rather than any major bugs. Speaking of which, I really haven't encountered anything drastic. The game runs perfectly fine without any hiccups, and overall I'd definitely recommend it. But wait, the video is not over. Like I said at the very beginning, this is a double review. Our next stop is Stronghold Crusader. Crusader was released a mere year after Stronghold, and to be perfectly honest, it feels more like an expansion pack than a fully fledged sequel. The biggest difference is the setting, of course. Crusader takes place in the Holy Lands in the Middle East during the Crusades. A proper military campaign has been scrapped in favor of 4 historical campaigns, each with 5 missions detailing the various stages of the Crusades. However, surprise surprise, a proper skirmish mode was added. Here you can create your own custom battles on many different maps, and you can set up starting resources as well as alliances. There is also a Crusader Trail mission pack of 50 plus something skirmish matches against various foes. Speaking of foes, Crusader expands on the roster of baddies by adding new characters such as Saladin, the Lionheart, and many others. Once again, all of these characters are voiced masterfully. Each character also has their own personal way of building their castles. Some, like the Rat or the Sultan for instance, make pretty primitive or downright broken castles, while others, like the wolf, can make artistic masterpieces. There's a couple of possible castle designs for each of the characters, and I like that a lot, as it gives a variety to each custom game. During a custom game you can also chat with your allies, if you have any that is, as well as request aid or order a targeted attack. Though I've noticed that certain characters, like the Caliph, very rarely, if ever, comply with your requests. The Old Guard also do not appear if you have them as allies, but rather their advisors speak for them. Moving on, what else has changed? Well, obviously, almost all of the buildings have different textures and sprites to fit the theme. The game is also brighter overall due to the ever-present sand. This of course limits the farmland on many maps, as well as many other resources, but it's all part of the course, this is a desert after all. There are also new music tracks added, and these, just like the old ones, are once again of stellar quality. Another major change is the addition of Arabian mercenary units. These units don't require weapons, just gold, and as such are on the average more expensive than their European counterparts. However, the same rules that apply to European units also apply here. Every single new unit is useful if used properly. Arabian bowmen are incredibly fast, horse archers are the ultimate harasser unit, slingers can cause total chaos en masse, assassins are invisible and can climb over walls and capture gates, while the Arabian swordsmen allow for a hasty replenishment of your armored forces. Slaves, fire ballista, and fire throwers are also here, and well, I already talked about what fire can do. Luckily, you also get a water pot. Now 3 water boys can try and stop the flaming inferno. But by far, the biggest and most radical change Stronghold Crusader brought is... the color of your army is now red instead of blue. Shocking, I know. Anyway, this mostly sums up everything about Stronghold Crusader, as there really isn't anything else to talk about. As a final note, it is worth noting that the AI pathfinding seems to be a bit better than before, and the overall game seems to be going much faster than in the original. Oh yeah, almost forgot. In 2008, Stronghold Crusader Extreme was released. This is Stronghold Crusader, but with superpowers, and can switch endlessly spawn troops free of charge. Up to 10k units at once. I'm not joking, look at this. I don't have anything to say about this except that the extreme trail is really unbalanced, and that I could not beat the vast majority of these maps without looking at the walkthrough for possible strategies. Finally, to sum everything up, both Stronghold and Stronghold Crusader are really enjoyable games. I have absolutely no problem recommending them both to anyone. The combination of castle management and combat, together with a great and laid-back atmosphere, makes Stronghold and Stronghold Crusader a real blast to play, especially during cold winter nights. Both games are available for dirt cheap on Steam and Good Old Games, so get to building the castle of your dreams right away.